Hey everybody, it's me, Michael Rooker. You might know me from some movies like Cliffhanger, the new Guardians of the Galaxy who came out the other day. And you also, if you were out last night at one of the theaters, or if you were in LA, you would have seen me hanging out with my buddy, Stan Lee. We did a nice presentation. It was called Extraordinary Stan Lee. And I was there, Stan was there, Chris Hardwick, he was hosting. Did a good job. Had a hell of a time with the microphones, though. It was really sad. It was a cool get-together. It was Stan. It was old friends of his. People chimed in. People who weren't there, they sent a video message. Really cool stuff. So yeah, that's my Michael Rooker, first time. They were doing a tribute to Stan Lee down in Los Angeles, and it was broadcast from LA, but you could go in the local theater. I think I was the only one in the theater, though, and course, had my phone with me, so I figured, you know what, screw it. I'm going to take some footage of some of the stuff, so in case you missed it. I didn't know the sequence of the programming, or else I would have grabbed more footage, like things of like the nice tributes from people. Like there was Mark Ruffalo chimed in. He sent a video message. I have some footage of Karen Gillian, and she chimed in. Seth Green. It was more of a "This Is Your Life, Stan Lee." So everybody from old workmates that Stan used to work with back in the 60s when he first started working. I also got some nice footage too in between stuff when they're talking about the life and times of Stan Lee. What they did was they had these, somebody was hand drawing on the computer, making it look like, sketches, and it's just basically here's Stan as a boy, here's Stan growing up. And different celebrities were doing the narration as they were doing the drawings. And people that I knew was, I'll just rattle off the list from here. Pom Klementieff, she played Mantis in the Guardian Galaxy Volume 2. Karen Gillian, as I said, Michael Rooker, Alan Tudyk showed for a bit. James Gunn did a video shout-out. J.K. Simmons and Kelly Hu was Lady Deathstrike in X-Men 2. Lou Ferrigno showed up. He was the original Hulk when they had a TV series back in the 80s. Todd McFarlane, who did Spawn, Hal Spark. So why don't we jump right into it, and we'll go from there, and we'll come back and I'll wrap up everything. Enjoy. So, broadcasting from a secret location somewhere in northern Ontario, just about an hour north of Toronto, and going to watch the Stan Lee with Chris Hardwick. What they call the Extraordinary Stan Lee.
Guy, I mean, not just creating so much of our pop culture, and not just so many things that are the biggest things in our pop culture now, but also inspiring creators, and also philanthropy, and also for decades preaching equality. I mean, you've done so much for our community. You've legitimized the nerd community by leaps and bounds.
But you notice, when he says those nice things about me, I never interrupt. Otherwise, I'd be down his throat all the time.
All the time, yeah.
Don't talk too much. It's my stage.
This is your stage.
When you're saying something nice, just keep going.
We're talking about the fact that you essentially were Hugh Hefner for nerds. I do want to say, Stan, as an actor, you're probably the highest grossing actor in all of film. All of the films that you've been in together, you're worth about $20 billion in all the films that
because of my cameos.
Because of your cameos, that's right. But before we get into bringing some people out, we made some videos here for you. This is just a little background on Stan. We're going to see how he got here today, and a quick look back at Stan's life. Let's take a look at the video.
Guy gave me a lift in his car. What do you mean how I got here? Well, all right, you have to say it in a fancy way, don't you?
Here's my fancy way.
Which way should I
face?
Should I look that way? December 28th was a very important date for me in the year 1922. That's when I was born, on the west side of Manhattan, at 98th Street and West End Avenue. I'm sorry I can't remember any more about my birth, but the next thing I remember, I was about 5 or 6 years old. My parents used to like to take photographs of me. They didn't have a camera, but there were always people in the neighborhood, professional photographers. I think you'd pay them a dime at that time. They would have a little pony with them, and they'd put the little kid on the pony and take this photo. We didn't have any money. It was during the Depression. My father, who was a great guy, but he had trouble getting a job. My earliest memories are just him sitting home reading the want ads in the newspaper. After a while, we moved to, I think, the Bronx in New York. We lived in a little apartment house on University Avenue in a 175th Street. When I was 8, 9, 10 years old, whatever it was, I used to roller skate and ride a bike. We also played hockey. There would be somebody stationed at the top of the street, so if a car came, he'd yell, "Hey, hey, car coming!" And we'd stop playing for a minute. The one thing I wanted was a bicycle, and finally my folks scraped up enough money, and they bought me this two-wheeler. And man, I felt as though I had been freed, because now I could go anywhere on that bike.
But I want to share a story with you. When I was in elementary school, I wasn't doing too well in school because I would be in the middle of the classroom, and you know, my textbook, I would put the Incredible Hulk and Spider-Man comic in the book, the textbook. So when the teacher was in class talking, I would pretend I was studying, read from the textbook, and I would read about the Hulk and Spider-Man. So the teacher one day said, "There's something wrong with Lou." They called the principal, said that this kid in the room, he's in the back, he keeps going, So I didn't realize, I kept, reading the comics, keep saying, I want to be like the Hulk, I want to be like the Hulk. And then they called the principal, come down, and she opened the book, she sees me with the comic book, and she looked at me, and I said, sorry, but what I want to say is that my passion, I'm glad I embraced the passion, maybe discovered bodybuilding, fitness, and 50 years, 40 years later, look where we are today. Look at all these people that love us. You affected billions and billions of people.
Beginning, what an honor and a treat it was for me to be your alter ego, your cranky, curmudgeonly alter ego in those movies with Sam and Toby and the gang, and it remains the highlight of my career. I did have an opportunity to meet you at a benefit, a charity event that you were a part of, and had to do with my kid's school at the time. And as I recall, you were a little bit out of shape, that you were not playing J. Jonah Jameson in the movies, but you allowed us how I was doing an okay job, so I appreciate that. And I appreciate, from age 9, the impact that you've had on my life and obviously on the lives of generations of American kids, international kids, I'm sure. Goes back to Sergeant Fury and his Howling Commandos and Spider-Man when I was 9 years old, and then a little later, checking out this thing called Stan's Soapbox and realizing, wow, this is real life. This guy's connected to what's going on in the world, and passionate about it, and you still are, and God bless you. Thanks, man.
Entire universe that so many of us are so invested in, and I just can't believe that I get to be a part of that and bring one of those characters to life. It feels like such an honor and a privilege. I love all the female roles that you created for all of us girls to look up to, which is so great, and all of the male roles too, because you're good too. But yeah, just thank you so much for all of your hard work, and you've had one hell of a career, so thank you.
Is that all of his most famous and successful characters were created after he was 35, which, as a guy who's consistently getting older, is inspiring to think that your best work could still always be ahead of you. Thanks for being awesome, Stan.
Do you have anything, as we're kind of keeping this moving, because we want to wrap this up so we can let Stan go home and let these nice folks go home? Anything that you want to say to Stan? Any last words?
Yeah, absolutely. I think specifically, Stan, I want to thank you on behalf of every nerdy kid who punched a bully at one point, or went on to do something heroic in their life, or stood up or became a fireman because you wrote something that as a 9-year-old you would read it and go, someday I'm going to actually help somebody. I think the ripple effect of the heroicism and the honesty of the characters you've helped create matter more than anybody could ever measure, for that very reason.
It really is unquantifiable.
Very nice.
I genuinely mean that. I've done CPR on someone and they're alive, and that's because I read Spider-Man when I was a kid and said, I'm dead serious, if there's trouble, I don't want to be the guy who can't do anything. And I'm in all sincerity, I love you for that.
That's very
And also, Morgan Spurlock just got here. He just showed up, so he's going to come out on stage and say hi.
Yeah.
This is Morgan Spurlock. Morgan, stand. Hey, Morgan Spurlock. Nice to see you.
Yeah.
I like to say people's first and last names. It's fun. Morgan, really quickly, any words for Stan?
Oh my God, this guy, what a...
Give him a microphone!
Hello, everybody. How are you? Thank you guys. How about Stan Lee? What an amazing human being. I've gushed over this amazing man so many times. Right. So I first got turned on to Spider-Man when I was like 7, 8 years old, watching this, and my mom says, "Oh, you realize this is a comic book?" And I was like, what are these things of which you speak? And so suddenly she brings me these comic books, and I am like suddenly diving into this man's brain like no other child ever could, and I'm diving into this, I'm diving into the X-Men. It's like one thing after the other. I just start eating everything that is Stan Lee in my life. And slowly but surely, he infects my brain. He infests me with like all of his brilliance, his genius, his creative. And like it was because of him that I started to want to make movies, to tell stories. I started to write my own comic books. And so then it was cut to like 30 years later when I was at Comic-Con, and we were doing the Simpsons special for Fox, the 20th anniversary special. And I go to a party, and across the room is Stan Lee. And somebody comes up to me and they said, "Would you like to meet Stan Lee?" And I go, "Oh my God, yes!" And I'm like giddy. I'm like a little kid, you know. And so like they take me over to Mr. Lee and they go, "Stan, this is Morgan Spurlock, Mr. Spurlock, Stan Lee." And I'm like, "Oh my God, Mr. Lee!" And I gush over him, tell him everything about that he's done for my life, how he's transformed it, and then made me want to tell stories. And Stan goes, "Oh my God, Morgan, it's so great to meet you. We should make a movie together. We should make a documentary. We should make a documentary about Comic-Con." And I go, "Yes, we should, Mr. Lee, yes, we should." And he turns around, and they said, "What was that all about?" And I said, "He wants to make a movie about Comic-Con." Cut to a year later, as Stan Lee and Joss Whedon are producing the film we made about Comic-Con, and it was one of the greatest experiences of my life, getting to get notes from this man, to get feedback from this man, to get to have creative conversations with this man. I am honored to get to be here, and I'm even more honored that I got to work with you.
You were a great guy to work for. You were one of the few people doing a documentary who knew what the hell he was doing and how to do it. And it was a pleasure, and I appreciate what you say.
And my favorite part, here's how I knew I made something good. When we premiered the movie at the Toronto Film Festival, Stan came up for the premiere, and after the film was done, he says, "I know it was good because I stayed awake for the whole thing."
Excellent. Thank you so much. Morgan Spurlock, Hal Sparks, Alan Tudyk. Nice to see you, Alan Tudyk. Hal Sparks.
Absolutely.
I want to read something to y'all. Let's lay it right on the line. Bigotry and racism are among the deadliest social ills plaguing the world today. But unlike a team of costume supervillains, they can't be halted by a punch in the nose or zapped by a ray gun. The only way to destroy them is to expose them, to reveal them for the insidious evils that they really are, and to recognize that the bigot is an unreasoning hater, one who hates blindly, fanatically, indiscriminately. If his hang-up is a black man, he hates all black men. If a redhead once offended him, he hates all redheads. If some foreigner beats him to a job, he downs all foreigners. He hates people he's never seen, people he's never known, with the equal intensity, with the equal venom. Now, we're not trying to say that it's unreasonable for one human being to bug another. But although anyone has the right to dislike another individual, it is totally irrational, patently insane to condemn an entire race, to despise an entire nation, or to vilify an entire religion. Sooner or later, if man is ever worthy to be desiring of his destiny, we must first fill our hearts with tolerance. For then, and only then, will we be truly worthy of the concept that man was created in God's image, a God who calls all of us his children. Now, I know that might sound like a recent speech that we didn't hear our president say, but But it was actually written in 1968, before many of us was born, by Mr. Stan Lee. Oh, respect you, so respect you. Thank you.
I don't know who he is. Talk to me.
Well, unlike many of the guys who came out tonight to pay the tribute, I'm really like a fan. I've made a band called the Wu-Tang Clan, and we're guys from Staten Island who would travel to school, right? And there's a comic book store on Victory Boulevard. I would stop there every morning and scramble my nickels and dimes together and get a comic. And what your comics did was inspire me and my whole crew. And one of the reasons why, and I'm not shy to say this to you, is within your comics I found so much diversity. I could look at Matt Murdock and see a handicap become Daredevil. I could look at an ex-convict like Luke Cage become Power Man. I could look at a nerd like Peter Parker become the Spider-Man. And the diversity goes on. Shang-Chi, Master of Kung Fu. A lonely guy from space, Norman Rad, becomes Silver Surfer. And I could go on and on, bro. Right? But watching all this diversities, you know, whether it was a female Storm or Invisible Girl, those characters inspired me and took me to a place where there was a world, a Marvel universe where there wasn't no bigotry, okay? Where there was heroes that looked like me, you know what I mean? And where I could think justice and fun prevailed over all.
Wouldn't that be the greatest world in the world if there were a world?
Todd McFarlane's here. How do we thank Sam? How do we end this show?
The way to thank him is so simple. Get ready.
Ready?
Excelsior! Thank you so much. Good night. Don't text and drive. Enjoy your burrito. Stan Lee, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Stan.
So there you go, true believer. There's the tribute to me, Stan Lee. And once again, Excelsior.